The morning of my wedding was as unremarkable as the years leading up to it. The sun rose, the birds sang, and the world went about its business, unaware of the monumental decision I was about to make. As I stood in front of the mirror, clad in a dress that was both too extravagant and too simple for my taste, I couldn't help but wonder if I was making the right choice. "Eliza, you look beautiful," my mother said, her voice laced with the kind of emotion only a wedding day could evoke. She adjusted the veil on my head, her hands trembling slightly. "Mark is a good man. You're lucky to have found each other." I forced a smile, my reflection betraying the uncertainty in my eyes. "Thanks, Mom." "I know he is," I replied, the words feeling rehearsed. Mark was a good man, stable, reliable, and kind. But as I repeated those adjectives in my head, they sounded more like the qualities one would seek in a loyal pet rather than a life partner. The ceremony was a blur of vows, kisses, and congratulatory hugs. Mark looked at me with a love so pure it almost made me forget my doubts. Almost. "Eliza, I promise to make you the happiest woman on earth," Mark whispered to me, his voice barely audible over the sound of the ocean waves crashing against the shore. We had chosen Hawaii for our wedding, a place as beautiful as it was distant from the reality awaiting us back home. "I promise to always be there for you, Mark," I whispered back, the words feeling heavy on my tongue. I meant them, yet a part of me wondered if always was a promise too vast for anyone to make. Our honeymoon was supposed to be the beginning of our happily ever after. Yet, as we explored the vibrant streets and lush landscapes of Hawaii, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Our conversations were pleasant but superficial, our laughter a little too forced, and our nights, well, they were as passionless as the rest of our relationship. It was on one of those nights, as I lay awake listening to Mark's steady breathing, that the weight of my decision fully settled in. I had married a man I respected but didn't truly love, in the hope that love would eventually find its way to us. But as the moonlight streamed through the window, casting shadows across our room, I couldn't help but feel trapped in a life I had chosen too hastily. The following day, determined to shake off the gloom, I suggested we visit a local park. It was there, amidst the laughter of children and the chatter of tourists, that my life took an unexpected turn. Mark had gone to fetch us some ice cream, leaving me alone on a bench when I was approached by three men. Their intentions were clear from the start, and as they advanced, I felt a terror I had never known. It was then, at my most vulnerable, that he appeared, a blond stranger whose presence changed everything. "Hey, leave her alone." His voice was commanding, cutting through the tension like a knife. The men turned towards him, their expressions a mix of surprise and disdain. "And what are you gonna do about it?" One of them sneered. What happened next was a blur of motion and violence. The stranger moved with a precision and ferocity that left two of the men on the ground, incapacitated. The third fled, leaving me with my rescuer under the Hawaiian sun. "Are you okay?" he asked, his blue eyes filled with concern. I nodded, unable to find my voice. He offered me his hand, helping me to my feet. "I'm Ethan," he said, introducing himself as if we had met under normal circumstances. "Eliza," I managed to say, my voice trembling. Ethan's presence was both comforting and unsettling. He had saved me, yet his actions hinted at a capability for violence that was as frightening as it was mesmerizing. As he escorted me to the hospital, insisting on staying until he was sure I was all right, I couldn't help but feel a connection to him, a bond forged in the chaos of those terrifying moments. But as I lay in the hospital bed later, with Ethan's concerned face the last thing I saw before drifting into a fitful sleep, I couldn't have imagined how deeply our paths would become entwined. My unremarkable beginning was about to lead me into a story of passion, betrayal, and a love that would defy all expectations. The park was alive with the vibrant energy of midday, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within me. As I sat alone on the bench, nursing my internal storm, I watched families and couples pass by, their laughter a distant echo against the backdrop of my thoughts. Mark had left in search of ice cream, his parting smile a feeble attempt to bridge the growing distance between us. It wasn't long before the uneasy peace was shattered. 3 men approached, their intentions clear from the predatory gleam in their eyes. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic plea for escape, but my body was frozen in place. "Hey, pretty lady, why so alone?" The tallest of the trio sneered, his voice oozing malice. I tried to stand, to flee, but fear rooted me to the spot. "I'm just waiting for my husband," I stammered, hoping the mention of Mark would deter them. "Looks like he's left you all by yourself." "How careless of him," another taunted, closing the distance between us. Panic clawed at my throat, rendering me speechless. I glanced around, desperate for an escape or a savior. That's when he appeared, as if conjured by my silent pleas. "Leave her alone." Ethan's voice was calm, yet it carried an authority that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The men turned towards him, their amusement evident. "And who are you?" "Her knight in shining armor." The third man mocked, his laughter grating on my already frayed nerves. Ethan didn't flinch. "Something like that," he replied, stepping closer. The air around us charged with an unspoken threat, a promise of violence that hung heavily between the would-be attackers and my unexpected protector. The tallest attacker stepped forward, intent on intimidating Ethan. "This is none of your business, man. Walk away while you can." Ethan's response was a smile, but there was nothing friendly about it. "I'm afraid I can't do that. So why don't you make it easy on yourselves and leave?" What happened next was a blur of motion. Ethan moved with a speed and precision that belied his calm demeanor. In moments, 2 of the men were on the ground, groaning in pain. The third hesitated, his resolve faltering as he took in the scene before him. With a curse, he turned and fled, leaving me with Ethan under the glaring sun. Ethan turned to me, his expression softening. "Are you okay?" he asked, his concern genuine. I nodded, still too shaken to form coherent words. "Thank you," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "Don't mention it. Let's get you to the hospital, just to make sure everything's all right," Ethan suggested, his tone leaving no room for argument. As we walked to his car, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Ethan had saved me from a potentially horrific fate with a fearlessness that both terrified and intrigued me. I stole glances at him, trying to reconcile the gentle man who held the car door open for me with the violent protector who had dispatched my attackers with ease. "Who are you?" I finally asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Ethan smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Just someone who couldn't walk away," he replied, his voice laced with a weight I couldn't understand. The drive to the hospital was a mix of silence and stolen glances. Ethan's presence was a balm, yet it stirred questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to. As we reached the hospital, I realized that the events of the day had irrevocably changed something within me. My life with Mark, the doubts about our marriage, and now Ethan, a stranger who had become my savior in the span of a few heartbeats. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. Ethan's intervention would lead me down a path filled with passion, betrayal, and a love that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself. The hospital's sterile environment did little to calm the storm raging within me. As I sat in the small examination room, waiting for the doctor to return, Ethan paced the narrow space, a caged animal restless in his confinement. The silence between us was heavy, filled with unasked questions and unsaid words. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, I broke the silence. "Why did you help me?" I asked, watching him closely. His actions had saved me, yet they hinted at a darkness I couldn't quite understand. Ethan stopped pacing and looked at me, his blue eyes intense. "I couldn't just stand by and watch," he said, his voice low. "No one deserves to feel helpless." "But you barely know me," I pointed out, confusion and curiosity warring within me. He smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "Sometimes you don't need to know someone to feel compelled to help them," he replied, his gaze drifting away from mine. The doctor's return spared us from further conversation, his presence a welcome distraction. After a thorough examination and assurances that I was physically unharmed, we were free to go. Ethan insisted on driving me home, a silent guardian in the growing dusk. As we neared my house, the weight of the day's events finally settled on me. Ethan had been my savior, a beacon of strength when I was most vulnerable. Yet, his actions and the skill with which he had dispatched my attackers hinted at a past he was reluctant to share. "Who are you, Ethan?" I asked again, this time more determined to uncover the truth. "You move like someone trained to fight, and there's a sadness in your eyes that speaks of stories untold." Ethan sighed, pulling the car over to the side of the road. The quiet of the night enveloped us, a stark contrast to the chaos of the day. "I was in the military," he began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Special forces. I've seen things, done things, that haunt me. When I saw those men threatening you, every instinct I had kicked in. I couldn't just walk away." His confession hung in the air between us, a bridge of understanding forming in its wake. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "For saving me. For trusting me with your secret." Ethan looked at me, a myriad of emotions flickering across his face. "I haven't trusted anyone in a long time," he admitted. "But there's something about you, Eliza. Something that makes me believe it's okay to let my guard down, even if just for a moment." The drive resumed in silence, both of us lost in our thoughts. When we arrived at my house, the sight of Mark waiting on the porch, his face etched with worry and relief, brought the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I was married, yet here I was, feeling a connection to another man, a man who had saved me, but also a man with a past as dark as the secrets he carried. "Eliza." Mark called out, rushing to meet me as I got out of the car. His concern was genuine, but as he wrapped his arms around me, I couldn't help but feel trapped. I turned to Ethan, wanting to say something, to explain the tumultuous emotions swirling within me, but he was already back in his car. "Take care, Eliza," he said, his gaze lingering on mine for a moment longer than necessary before he drove away into the night. As I watched his car disappear, I realized that Ethan had left me with more than just the memory of his heroism. He had awakened a part of me I didn't know existed, a part that longed for passion, for adventure, for something more than the safe, predictable life I had with Mark. But with Ethan's departure came the realization that I was standing on the edge of a precipice, torn between the life I had chosen and the life that could be. Ethan's secret was out, but it was the secrets within my own heart that threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the choices we make in the pursuit of happiness. The days that followed were a testament to the fragility of the facade I had built around my marriage. Mark's concern in the aftermath of the attack was palpable, his efforts to comfort and protect me a constant reminder of the bond we shared. Yet, each tender gesture, each word of reassurance, felt like another weight added to the scales of my guilt and confusion. Ethan's presence in my life, albeit brief, had ignited a spark of desire for something beyond the confines of my marriage, casting a shadow over the life I had built with Mark. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the silence between us grew heavy, a tangible barrier that neither of us seemed able to breach. Mark's voice broke the stillness, tentative and laced with concern. "Eliza, we need to talk," he began, his eyes searching mine for a sign of the woman he knew. "Ever since the attack, you've been distant. I know it was traumatic, but I'm here for you. We can get through this together." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I had vowed to spend my life with, the man who had been my rock through countless challenges. And yet, the words that spilled from my lips were not the reassurances he sought. "Mark, I'm lost," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. "That day in the park, it changed something in me. I'm questioning everything, even us." Mark's expression crumbled, the pain in his eyes a mirror to the turmoil in my heart. "Is this about him? The man who saved you?" he asked, his voice tinged with a mixture of fear and anger. I hesitated, the truth a bitter pill. It's not just about Ethan, I said, struggling to articulate the maelstrom of emotions within me. He made me feel alive, Mark, in a way that I haven't felt in a long time. But this is about us, about me. I don't know who I am anymore, or what I want. Mark stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor in his haste. So what? You're saying you want out. After all these years, you're just going to throw it all away because of some fleeting attraction to a stranger. It's not that simple, I protested, my heart aching at the raw pain in his voice. I love you, Mark, but I'm suffocating. I need to find myself again, to figure out what I want from life. And I don't know if I can do that with you. The words hung between us, a declaration of war against the life we had built together. Mark looked at me, a mix of disbelief, hurt, and resignation etched into his features. Then I guess there's nothing left to say, he said, his voice breaking as he turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the shattered remains of our marriage. In the days that followed, our home became a battlefield of silence and unspoken regrets. We moved around each other like ghosts, a constant reminder of what had been lost. The decision to separate, when it finally came, felt like both a relief and a death knell to the life we had envisioned. As I packed my bags, the weight of my choices bore down on me. I was leaving behind the security and love of a man who had been my partner in every sense of the word, chasing the ghost of a feeling awakened by another. The uncertainty of the future loomed large, a daunting path that I would now have to navigate alone. Yet, amidst the fear and doubt, there was a spark of hope. A hope that in stepping away from the life I had known, I might find the person I was meant to be. It was a gamble, a leap into the unknown, but as I closed the door behind me, I knew it was one I had to take. For in the end, the journey to find oneself is the most arduous and rewarding journey of all. The night air was cool, a gentle balm against the turmoil that churned within me as I made my way through the city's dimly lit streets. My destination was unclear, a mere impulse driven by the need to escape the oppressive silence of the apartment I now called home. The echoes of my conversation with Mark haunted me, each word a reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. It was on a deserted bridge overlooking the city's skyline that fate intervened, guiding my steps to where Ethan stood, his silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. He turned at the sound of my approach, a look of surprise quickly giving way to concern. "Eliza, what are you doing here?" His voice was gentle, the concern evident in his tone. "I could ask you the same," I replied, trying to mask the tumult of emotions his presence evoked. Ethan looked away, his gaze lost in the distant lights. "I come here to think," he said after a moment, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's one of the few places where I can find some semblance of peace." I moved to stand beside him, the proximity stirring a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cool night air. "I left Mark," I confessed, the words spilling from me in a rush. I couldn't pretend anymore. Our marriage, it was suffocating me. Ethan's reaction was immediate, his body tensing as he turned to face me. "Eliza, are you sure about this? Leaving your husband is a big step." "I know," I said, meeting his gaze. "But it's not just about leaving Mark. It's about finding myself again. And part of that is because of you." The admission hung between us, a confession of the turmoil and desire Ethan had awakened in me. For a moment, he said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sigh, he stepped closer, his hand reaching out to gently touch my arm. "Eliza, I need to tell you something," Ethan began, his voice serious. "That day in the park, when I saved you, it wasn't just a random act. I've been watching over you, long before that moment." I stared at him, taken aback by his revelation. "Watching over me? Why?" Ethan looked away, the weight of his confession evident in his posture. "It's complicated. There are things about my past, about who I am, that aren't easy to explain. But know this, everything I've done, it was to keep you safe. The implications of his words were staggering, a maze of questions and emotions that I couldn't begin to navigate. Ethan, I don't understand. If you've been watching over me, then you must know about my life, about Mark. Why would you do this? He turned to face me, his blue eyes intense in the dim light. Because I couldn't stand the thought of something happening to you. Your husband. He's not who you think he is. The statement was like a blow, knocking the breath from me. What do you mean? I asked, my voice trembling. Ethan hesitated, then took a deep breath. Mark is involved in things, dangerous things. My previous work put me on his trail. I was supposed to watch him, gather evidence. But then I saw you, and everything changed. The revelation was a tidal wave, sweeping away the remnants of the life I thought I knew. Mark, my husband, the man I had loved and trusted, was a stranger, his secrets darker than anything I could have imagined. And you, I said, my voice barely audible. Who are you, really? Ethan reached for my hand, his grip firm and reassuring. I'm someone who made a choice, Eliza. A choice to protect you, even if it meant crossing lines I never thought I'd cross. My past, my work, it's all led me to this moment. To you. The night stretched out before us, a canvas of shadows and light. In Ethan's confession, I found not only the unraveling of my marriage, but the beginning of a journey into the unknown. A journey that, for the first time, I would not face alone. As we stood on the bridge, the city's skyline a testament to the complexities of life, I realized that the path ahead was fraught with danger and uncertainty. But with Ethan by my side, I felt a glimmer of hope. For in the midst of betrayal and secrets, I had found an unlikely ally, and perhaps a chance at a new beginning. The morning after my night of revelations with Ethan, the world seemed to wear a different face. The sun's rays, usually a source of warmth and comfort, now felt like the harsh spotlight of truth, illuminating the lies and secrets that had entangled my life. With Ethan's words still echoing in my mind, I knew that confronting Mark was inevitable. The man I had shared my life with was a stranger, his actions shrouded in shadows that I could no longer ignore. As I made my way back to the apartment we once shared, a sense of dread settled over me, heavy and suffocating. The door swung open to reveal Mark, his expression a mix of surprise and concern. Eliza, where have you been? I've been worried sick, he said, stepping forward as if to embrace me, but I recoiled, the distance between us a chasm too wide to bridge. Mark, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil within me. There are things I've learned, things about you that I can't ignore. Mark's face paled, the mask of concern slipping to reveal a flicker of fear. What are you talking about, Eliza? What things? I took a deep breath, summoning the courage to confront the man I no longer knew. I know about your involvement in dangerous activities. Ethan told me everything. The mention of Ethan's name was like a spark to dry tinder. Mark's demeanor shifted, anger and betrayal warring in his eyes. Ethan, you've been talking to him. That man is a liar, Eliza. You can't believe anything he says. But I do believe him, I countered, the conviction in my voice surprising even myself. He showed me evidence, Mark. How can you deny it? For a moment, Mark seemed to falter, the weight of his secrets bearing down on him. Then, with a sigh, he sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Eliza, I never wanted you to be a part of this, he said, his voice muffled by his hands. I thought I could protect you from the truth. Protect me? By lying to me? By leading a double life? I asked, incredulous. How could you think that was protection? Mark looked up, his eyes haunted. It started small, just a few jobs here and there to pay off some debts. But it quickly spiraled out of control. I was in too deep, Eliza. I couldn't find a way out. And so you chose to drag me into your web of lies? I said, the hurt and betrayal sharpening my words. I never wanted to drag you into anything, Mark insisted, standing to face me. I love you, Eliza. Everything I did to keep us safe, to provide for us. Love? Is that what you call this? I asked, gesturing to the space between us, now filled with lies and secrets. You don't even know what love means, Mark. Love is based on trust, on honesty. And you've shattered both. Mark reached out, as if to touch me, but I stepped back, putting more distance between us. I'm sorry, Eliza. I truly am. If there's any way I can make this right, please tell me. I shook my head, the finality of my decision settling in my heart. There's nothing left to say, Mark. I can't be a part of this life, a part of your lies. It's over. With those words, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the life I had known, the man I had loved. The fallout of Mark's actions was a wound too deep to heal, a betrayal that could not be forgiven. As I stepped into the sunlight, the shadows of my past life stretching long behind me, I knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of freedom, a glimmer of hope for a future unburdened by the secrets and lies that had defined my past. The days following my departure from Mark were a blur of emotions and decisions. Each morning brought with it the stark realization that the life I had known was gone, replaced by an uncertain future. Yet, amidst the turmoil, there was a burgeoning sense of liberation, a freedom to redefine my existence on my own terms. Ethan, true to his word, had been my unwavering support, a steady presence in the chaos that had become my life. It was on one of these mornings, as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains of my new apartment, that I found myself sitting across from Ethan at a small, quaint cafe. The world outside was just waking up, but for us, it felt like a moment suspended in time, a chance to breathe and to plan. I've been thinking, I began, tracing the rim of my coffee cup with a finger, about everything that's happened, about where I go from here. Ethan looked at me, his blue eyes reflecting a sincerity that reached deep into my soul. And what have you decided? He asked, his voice gentle, encouraging me to voice the thoughts that had been swirling in my mind. I want to start over, Ethan. Truly start over, I said, the words feeling like a declaration of intent. I don't want to be defined by my past, by Mark's mistakes or mine own. I want to find out who I am when I'm not someone's wife, someone's victim. Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering mine, a gesture of solidarity and support. You're incredibly strong, Eliza. You've been through so much, and yet, here you are, ready to face the world on your own terms. I have no doubt you'll find your way. But I'm scared, I confessed, allowing myself to be vulnerable in front of him. Starting over it is daunting. I don't even know where to begin. That's the beauty of starting over, Ethan said, a smile playing on his lips. You get to decide where to begin. And you're not alone, Eliza. I'm here, for whatever you need. His words were a balm to my weary soul, offering comfort and reassurance. Thank you, Ethan, for everything. I don't think I could have gotten through this without you. Ethan squeezed my hand gently. I told you once that I made a choice to protect you. That hasn't changed. But more than that, I want to be here to see you thrive, to see you rediscover yourself. Our conversation continued, a blend of practical plans and shared dreams. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to envision a future filled with possibilities, a canvas waiting for new colors. Ethan and I talked about my interests, my passions that had been buried under the weight of my former life. He encouraged me to explore them, to take classes, to travel, to write, to do anything and everything that would help me rediscover the person I was meant to be. As we left the cafe, stepping out into the light of a new day, I felt a sense of purpose stirring within me. The path ahead was uncharted, fraught with challenges and uncertainties, but it was mine to walk. With Ethan by my side, not as a protector, but as a partner in this journey of self-discovery, I felt a sense of hope. The final words of our conversation lingered in my mind, a promise and a prophecy. This is just the beginning, Eliza, Ethan had said, his gaze locked with mine. A new chapter in your life, and I can't wait to see where it leads. As we walked down the street, the city awakening around us, I realized that this was indeed a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, to redefine, to rediscover. And with each step, I felt the pieces of my new life falling into place, a mosaic of possibilities that was mine to create.